Good morning. There are other reasons why I started this video channel, and one of them was to talk about my childhood, where I had to deal with very difficult a very difficult situation. My father was a cattle rancher, and when I was still just 5 years old, I noted that we had got a new ranch property, and my father started taking me and my sister to the neighbors, and he would man that had just moved there not very long before, and so I was troubled by how he behaved when we went there. He would tell us little girls to play outside and not bother them in any way, and he would go inside the cabin, where it was sort of a cabin, old ranch property, and he claimed that he was doing work in there or something. I was probably I was a very talkative child, and I might have asked him this question. And anyway, I began to get troubled by this, because I didn't see any evidence that he was working. This wasn't how he usually worked. And so I began to question, and my father was an alcoholic. He got drunk every weekend, practically. He would go party. So I was used to him doing, and was upset by his drinking. He would go off and party, and I was the oldest child, and the way he behaved caused my mother a lot of grief. She just was not happy, and I didn't blame her. I didn't blame her at all for not liking him going off every weekend and leaving her to drink with his buddies. And she didn't drink, so that was, I suppose, the excuse that he didn't take her. And my grandmother had gotten so upset when her youngest son, my father's youngest brother, got killed in riding in a rodeo, and he'd been drinking too, that she insisted that my mother go with my dad so she could do the driving, because she said she didn't want another son to die. And so for a while, quite a while, my mother had gone with my dad. But she complained that he'd give her the slip when they got to town, if he could. And, well, anyway, him visiting this neighbor got me concerned, because she had, after 4 years, she had had another baby. So she was home with the baby, and me and my sister were supposedly being tended by him, and he would be going over to this neighbor, and we'd be running all over the fields, doing anything we happened to want to, and he wouldn't even peek out the door. But of course he assumed, they both assumed that we knew how to take care of ourselves. But anyway, I was walking up the walk one day with my dad and the man who'd come out to talk to him. And all of a sudden this man started talking to my dad, and he just said the absolutely most obscene thing and it was long too. I didn't even understand it. I tried to follow it to my dad. And I was like, and after he went in the house, I thought, I didn't read yet, and I thought, that was the first I got the idea that men might have sex with other men. Well, this was a very shocking introduction to this, but I couldn't see any other reason for him to say what he did to my dad. And my dad just kind of, and I looked at him, Daddy, what are you going to say? And he just ignored me, and I'm sure I thought, well, he's just going to try to pretend that I didn't hear that, and hope I didn't, and hope I didn't think anything of it, but I did think something of it, and I thought, oh, my poor mother, I know she doesn't know this. She didn't talk about it, because she was quite a bit younger than my dad. She'd married him when she was like 18, and he was 26. So he was up in his 30s now, and she was, and you know, she was more like a kid herself. I mean, if she had something on her mind, she would just say it. So I knew that she had she didn't seem to know any more than I did, about men, and a whole lot more, because and so I was very upset and disturbed by, well, us playing around, and then I found out my dad had hired this man to come and work for him over on our ranch. And at the time, we slept outside in the summer, we slept outside in a small building that had been converted into a bedroom. It had one time been a chicken coop, but my mother had this carpenter make it sort of into an outdoor bedroom, so me and my sister would sleep out there in the summer. Well, this was, we were told that we couldn't sleep out there this summer because he was going to sleep in this, he would be given this, well, I thought, oh dear, this is even worse. Now this man's going to come over, and so then my father continued on every weekend, going to town, as we called it, to get alcohol. He'd have to go clear to town where his mother lived in the winter, and died quite a bit, but in the summer they all came over to the ranch community where my grandfather's ranch was. And he had also owned that Salt Gulch ranch where my father had taken over, and he'd homesteaded it. So anyway, my dad continued to go, and I happened to overhear my mother talking about it, and she said, well, Bill, that was the name of and he was from Canada. He was a transit from Canada. And they were roaming the country like hobos, looking for work. It was during the Depression, still the Depression. I was born in the Depression, 1931. Well, she said that he got very angry because my dad didn't take him with him to party. And my dad told him, Well, he hired him to stay home and do the chores because Mother said she wouldn't do it anymore. She told my dad that she wasn't going to change the water. She wasn't going to do anything. He was going to have to hire this done if he was going to go off and leave it. And my dad was just a stickler about changing the water, the irrigating water on all the irrigated land. He would never neglect it if possible, even when he was drinking. So he told Bill, well, I hired you to do the chores while I'm gone. I'm not taking you. So anyway, she said that Bill was very angry. And my mother said, oh, as if she's going to take an ugly old thing like him along. And she sort of implied that, and me sitting listening, I thought, uh-oh, Dad's, Mom sort of gets it, but she doesn't really. And I knew my dad's temper. Well, my mother had a very bad temper too, and I thought they were skirting around what this was all about because they were both afraid to clash head on about what was really involved. My mother, she seemed to almost get it, a glimmer, but she didn't. Well, here was the scenario of my dad gone and made him very jealous, and here I was playing out there by the Krells, and here come Bill along and said to me, do you want to go tend the water with me? Well, I never had a hired man ask me to go tend the water with him, and I was sitting there thinking of what I could say or do, and he grabbed me by the hand, and he didn't give me any choice. He took me around the hill. Now, there was a big hill right in the middle of the ranch. So when he went around that hill, he would be hidden from sight from where my mother was inside the ranch house. Well, here I was being hurried down toward the lower fields as fast as my legs could go, and him dragging me almost. And I thought, oh, this is very bad, very bad. And it was. As he took me down there, and he took me into the corn that was up quite a ways, and pushed me down, and then they began to molest me. Oh boy. And of course, he didn't do very much until I said, my mother will be looking for me. I have to go. I have to go. So, he finally let me up relatively fast, and I started back to the house, and I was just in such a state of shock and upset that I almost felt crippled, like I couldn't even run, but I had to hurry before he changed his mind and got home and got back there. And then I started to think, oh, could I even tell my mother? Then I started thinking about how hard such a thing was to even talk about. Even to this day, molestation. It's very hard to talk about what it involves, what this involved. a father bringing a hired man onto the ranch for obvious purposes, for himself, and he molests his 5-year-old daughter because he's angry, jealous. And I already knew the reason. But I had been jumping around and present all during the winter meetings, so I probably attracted his attention. So the first thing he does, when he's very angry at my father, is he does something he knows would just absolutely kill my father. Because I was the apple of his eye. The oldest child, smart, and my father just, he took us riding all the time, he'd take us fishing. In spite of his drinking, my father was a very conscientious rancher when it came to the animals. So I looked on it as he thought of us as, and my mother didn't have the same kind of love of little kids that he did, an interest in them. So my father was actually my ally, I thought of, between, and my mother was so frustrated with her life with him and his drinking. Well, I attributed that to her giving us a whipping every single day. And then I also thought that since my hair was blonde and my mother's was dark, she resented me having blonde hair, because at that time it was extremely blonde and it would shine in the sun, and she'd say, and she'd just grab my hair and just whack it off, and I thought, oh dear. And my dad acted like, well, I can treat my own flesh and blood. He treated them special because they had his blood and they had his brains. So he was a very superior acting guy. And oh dear, so you can imagine how confounded I was about what to do about this horrifying thing that had developed. What to do about it? Well, right now, just imagine any molested child comes up just like me. What am I going to do about it? And people, I could not see how I could report this, because it was so complicated and it involved subjects that people don't talk about, homosexual behaviors. How could I bring it up in a society that hardly even recognized it as going on, as people even doing it? Nice women didn't like to hear about such goings on. Now remember, this was in, I was in Mormon, Utah, and I think the Mormons were extra determined that they were going to do everything just so, because they'd been criticized so much for polygamy, which the mainstream Mormons no longer practiced, but were continually being accused of being polygamous because there were still some outlaw polygamists dotting Utah, living in Salt Lake, living in Short Creek, which later became Colorado City, Hillsdale. They were, and there had been a time in Whitso. They were known polygamists that were still practicing polygamy. And they were assumed to be Mormon, but they weren't. They weren't the mainstream. So there was all this conflict going on, and I think this had caused Mormons to be extra punishing of anything, any impropriety. So, and the children naturally felt all this pressure, and I was like, how can I? And the first thing like I said, I'd already seen my dad. For one thing, I'd seen him fight a guy that he accused of stealing his cattle. And when he started losing the fist fight, which I witnessed, he told my mother he was going for his gun. And I thought to myself, when this all happened, he will go for his gun. That's the first thing he'll do. He'll try to kill him if I tell him and mother at the same time. And he will not want him, because he's a very talky guy, go to be arrested, because he might and talk about what's been going on. Who knows what he'll do? This was a very unpredictable guy who had now crossed the line in more ways than one. So, but I thought, how can I handle it myself? And indeed, 2 more times while I was trying to think what to do about this terrible thing happening, he got me again. The 3rd time, I thought, I either have to tell or I have to get serious about defending myself. By that time I was 6 years old, from this grown man. How can I do it? And because I decided I couldn't tell, because my dad, for one thing, was suicidal. He might kill himself, as he threatened to do, and I'd heard all about that too. Wouldn't take much, I didn't think, for him to kill himself. Then what would happen to us? So I decided that I would have to stay within 10 feet of my mother at all times. And I would keep my little sister with me so he couldn't get her. And this is how I did it. How I decided I had to defend myself, because I couldn't talk about this. And I'm still having trouble talking about it. We as a society are still not letting our children feel that they can talk about molestation. You'd think it never happened. I know it happens. I know it does. And one way it is happening is because we are not holding people accountable for what they do. That means we don't hold them accountable for abortion, for killing, what used to be considered a crime, to kill your own child in the womb. Abortion was illegal. Now it's okay. Well, now I suppose, and we know very well what happens when you encourage it, man-boy sex, man-little girl sex, grown woman, younger woman sex, you get crime, molestation, criminal, underage children being molested in this society because we're too lenient on crime. Oh, abortion is not wrong anymore, and neither is molestation. Tell yourself. I'll tell you, it'll always be wrong. Always. And I'm a witness that it is. And it changes people. It turns them into troubled, very often troubled, mixed up people who have been recruited into being sex partners. Recruited. Taken against their will. That's what you do when you involve a child in sexual activity. And I can't tell you, I became a Democrat because I thought it dealt with homosexuality better, like my dad. But I've come to the conclusion that they have just become very indulgent. They're supporting abortion. Supporting what? Man, boy, woman, child, woman, girl, sex. Which is wrong. It is dead wrong, and it'll always be wrong. And I'm a witness of just how what that does to you.